We certainly apologize for this glitch, and we won't do it again. But we thought it would be a brilliant idea, and that's what we get for thinking about it. We're going to call the meeting to order at 6:15. We are going to grant permission to Westwood Media Center to live stream and videotape this meeting. And does anyone else wish to record the meeting? Can you again give me a signal that you can hear me?
I can unmute people.
Okay, great, good, thank you. All right, we're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. All right, thank you all. We are doing this as a, what do we call this, as a hybrid meeting. And so Jane and Jim and I are in the room here, and everyone else is on Zoom. So we want to welcome you. We want to welcome you to the meeting. Let's, do we start now with member roll call?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Right. Am I unmuted? Yes. When I call your name, just because we're hybrid, you're going to need to answer me whether you're on Zoom or in person. So Bill Bruce.
I think they're all muted.
Say it again, Bill.
Bill Bruce. Is he on mute?
Yeah.
Thank you, Bill. I see you.
You're on Bill.
Can everybody unmute themselves just so we can get this moving, and then we'll, when Emily starts, you can mute again. Jim Ferraro?
Present, in the room.
In the room. Lauren Fitzpatrick?
Present.
In the room or on Zoom?
Sorry, here on Zoom.
Thank you. Mike Gay?
You're on Zoom.
George Hertz?
Here on Zoom.
Angela Hughes?
Here on Zoom.
Peter Ittig?
You're on Zoom.
Caitlin Jerzak?
Here on Zoom.
Tom Kilgariff?
Yes, on Zoom.
George Laham?
Here on Zoom.
Diane McCarthy?
In the room.
Nadine? Let's see her. Christina?
Here on Zoom.
Chris Prada?
You're on Zoom.
And Alex Ye.
You're on Zoom.
Thank you all.
Great, thank you. So again, we want to welcome you. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to discuss the one warrant article that will be before the town at the special town meeting. George Hertz and I did some preliminary meetings over the course of the summer with Pam Dukeman, Pat Ahern, Emily Parks, and other folks so that we could be informed about the contents of tonight's meeting and help to move it along. We really want to encourage members of FinCom to ask questions. I want to remind you all that you will have a whole nother opportunity to do that. So as you listen carefully tonight and formulate your questions, keep in mind that there will be another meeting on the 20th where we will deliberate and vote. That's the public hearing, and so we're really encouraging members of the public to come to that, if not here tonight. So please ask your questions, make your comments tonight, but do keep in mind there will be another opportunity for FinCom to deliberate before the vote, and that is on the 20th. We hope that you all had a chance to review the material in advance. And we're just going to kick this right off with Emily Parks, the school superintendent, and Maya Plotkin, the chair of the school building committee, to do an initial presentation. I do want to say before they start that what we are going to do tonight is the school building committee and the superintendent will do a presentation for about 20 minutes, half an hour. Then, at the end of their presentation, we will open it up to FinCom questions and comments. Please hold it. If you have a comment you'd like to make or a question you'd like to ask, please feel free to put it in the chat. Members of the public and the press, also please feel free to use the chat. Then we're going to move into a presentation by Pam Dupin. That probably will go a little bit longer, perhaps an hour. And at the end of that presentation, we're going to open that up to questions and comments from FinCom. Again, use the chat. Encourage you to do that. People then will be prepared for your question. And then finally, at the end of the evening, we're going to open it up to questions and comments from the public and the press. So that's the process. Use the chat, please. Remember, you're going to have a lot of time to discuss this. Emily.
And I would like to make an observation. The sound quality for your voice is very poor.
I will take my mask off.
The microphone needs to be moved closer. I had difficulty understanding portions of what you said.
Okay. Is that better? The mask off?
It's a bit better.
Okay, great. Okay. Maya and Emily, welcome, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you. I think, Emily, are you able to share your screen, or do you need permission?
I'm not. Jane, are you going to run the slides, or do you want to give me permission to share my screen?
I think we've already given you permission to share.
No.
No? Here we go. Sorry about that.
Here we go.
There you go. You should be fine, Emily.
All set.
Great. So thank you very much for having us today. Before we begin, I just want to introduce the participants from our side. As you know, we have Superintendent Emily Parks. I am Maya Plotkin on the school committee and the school building committee. Also with us tonight is Chin Lin from Compass, our owner's project manager, and I believe Tim Bonfatti is here as well. He may be in the attendee list. So as you may recall, last spring, we were in front of you and provided a soup to nuts presentation of the project to FinCom, to the community, to anyone who would listen to us. So our plan tonight is to hit the highlights of that presentation, show you some updated renderings, give you updated information, and then turn it over for questions, and then eventually to Pam, who will really get into the financial details of the warrant article. So just as a reminder, this project is for a consolidation of the Hanlon and Deerfield schools to be built on the existing Hanlon site for a maximum capacity of 560 students. I don't want to go through all of the community benefits. There are a lot of them, but some of them include new playing fields, a new gym with one regulation size court that can also accommodate 2 middle school courts on the crosswise, additional performance space for the town, high quality instructional space for our students. We also want to ensure that residents can still access Lowell Woods from the Hanlon School at all times. And finally, we know that there's traffic and parking issues that currently exist at the Hanlon School, so we're hoping to fix those. Well, we will hopefully fix those parking issues and traffic issues as well. So I'm going to kick it over to Emily now. She's going to give us a little bit of history and go from there.
Great, thank you. So I know some of this is review for this committee, so I will just go over this quickly. So just to put the Hanlon Deerfield project in context, the project is part of an ongoing process of capital planning and maintaining our assets. Back in the late 1990s, we completed an addition and some renovations on Thurston Middle School. In the early 2000s, the Martha Jones and Downey elementary schools were fully renovated, so those buildings are in great shape. In our most recent building project, between 2000 and 2005, the town voted to fund and completed construction of the current Westwood High School. And so then in 2015, the school committee commissioned a master plan capital needs study and to take a look at all of our facilities. That study identified Hanlon, Deerfield, and Sheehan as the schools that were needing significant capital repair or replacement. So just to remind you, these 3 elementary schools that we've been studying as part of this multi-year process, Hanlon, Deerfield, and Sheehan, were all built between 1948 and 1953. They are pretty old buildings. All 3 of those schools have educational space deficiencies. especially in areas like special education. Special education really was not part of the thinking back in the 50s when these buildings were built. Also in things like art, music, and the classrooms are undersized compared to today's schools.
But maybe even more significantly, every school needs significant systems upgrades in things like HVAC, plumbing, electrical, the exterior windows, accessibility. Hanlon needs a new roof. Some of the systems in these buildings are the original systems that were built back in the 50s. Hanlon and Deerfield both have temporary modular classrooms on them. We call them temporary, but the Deerfield modulars, for instance, were put on in 1995. I think at this point, they're pretty much part of the building. We can't really consider them a temporary fix any longer. Out of this capital needs study, though, Hanlon was identified as the building that was in the most need. And I just, with the theory that a picture is worth 1,000 words, we've been talking about the condition of the building since 2017 when we opened them up for community tours. But just to sort of highlight what I mean when we say we have educational deficiencies, this, for example, on the lower left is the art classroom at the Deerfield School. It's you're sort of looking down from a stairway into this very small room that actually originally was built to be a locker room. It's attached to the gym, but that is the art classroom at Deerfield. Over here, you're looking at the library, and you can see it really isn't a library. It's a classroom that's being used as a library. And in order to get our collection in, the stacks you can see are not accessible to elementary age children because we have to stack the books so high. So those are some of the things that we think about educationally. In terms of the systems, we're dealing with old boilers. This is the Post-it note here says "do not open" because the window is not functional. And then this is an example of a corroding pipe from the Hanlon School. And one of the things that I like to explain to people is that, part of the issue is that in some cases, the systems are so old that we can't get anyone to bid the job. So the last time we really tried to do a major plumbing overhaul at Hanlon, people simply won't bid it. The systems are just too outdated. And then you may remember here in the lower right that last February, unfortunately, we had a ceiling collapse in one of the classrooms at Hanlon. Thankfully, everyone, it happened before school, so everyone was fine. But obviously it caused a disruption. And I just say that to say that the process of maintaining these buildings and kind of keeping them going at this point does pose some real everyday challenges for us. And so as a result of that master planning study, the school district decided that it would submit a statement of interest, as you know, to the Massachusetts School Building Authority, the MSBA. We submitted for Hanlon because it was the building deemed to be in the greatest need. We were accepted into that program in December 2017 on our first submission. Subsequent to that, Westwood met with the MSBA. We went into Boston to their offices and asked them if they would be willing to expand their investment to help us solve for multiple schools. We saw an opportunity here to partner with them and to expand the amount of funding that we could get from the state. And they were, in fact, willing to do that. They allowed us to study multiple different consolidation options. And so since February 2019, Westwood has been working with the MSBA to scope out and design a new school to replace Hanlon and Deerfield. So those two schools would be consolidated under this project. An update since we spoke with you in the spring, we got wonderful news in April 2021 that the MSBA board, in fact, voted to grant Westwood a reimbursement amount of up to about $18.2 million for the construction of a new Hanlon Deerfield school, subject to the approval of residents at town meeting and at a town election. One of the things that we've been really pleased with throughout this multi-year process is the level of engagement that we've had from residents. We've really, the school committee's been very committed to making sure that there were opportunities for back and forth participation with the community and with residents. So you can see here that since December 2018, we've actually had 75 open public meetings that are related to this project. 13 of those were community forums. The community forums were timed intentionally at different phases of the process so that we could share with the community where we were, get their feedback, get their reaction, get their input, and then use that information in the next phase of the process. One of the examples of that is that we went through a long process of developing the evaluation criteria. Initially in our feasibility study, we looked at 15 different project options. We developed the evaluation criteria to reflect what the community told us were their priorities and what's important to them. And we feel good that we have ultimately selected a project to move forward that meets that criteria. I will tell you that as I see, as we've gotten farther into the design process and sort of see the design coming to life, I'm really gratified. I feel like our design team has clearly listened very carefully and thoughtfully and is designing a building that matches what we have heard from residents. So the project that was selected after this lengthy process is, as you know, a Hanlon-Deerfield consolidation. It is new construction. The design enrollment, which is an MSBA term, it sort of means the maximum number of students that could be accommodated in the school, is 560 students, and it is at the current Hanlon location. So I'm going to quickly just fly through some renderings here so you can see what we're talking about. This is an exterior rendering that is a view of the approach to the main entrance. This is another view of the main entrance, just pulled back a little further so that you're viewing it from the parking lot. The way the building is designed, over here on the left is where the academic wings are. And then over here on the right, you can see this is the gym. This is what we kind of consider the public space, the gym, the cafeteria, for example. This is something that's called the STEM porch. It's STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math. And so this is part of our science program. I think that when we spoke with you in the spring, we didn't have interior renderings. So I just wanted to give you a glimpse inside the building. This is a view of the main lobby, main office, reception area. This is a view of that same area, just looking the other direction into the cafeteria. This obviously is the cafeteria. You can see we talked about the fact that there would be additional performance space in this building, and it's a platform that's built into the cafeteria. The library media center. This is a rendering of the gym. As Maya mentioned, we heard a lot about gyms from community members, a lot about the need for additional gym space in town. And this gym is able to hold a high school basketball game, not striped yet in this rendering, but it also is sized so that you could have two middle school sized cross courts. So you could have two middle school or youth basketball games happening simultaneously. And we also heard from the community a desire to have seating for spectators, so we've included that. This is an example of a typical classroom space. And then this is a view of the corridor, which also functions as what we call an extended learning area. So it's a bit wider than your typical corridor. And this is a place where we have room for breakout space, for sort of collaborative hands-on activities. It's a space that really reflects the kind of teaching and learning that we're doing these days. This is a view of what the playground might look like. You can see over here the swings. We heard from a student focus group that swings are very important, so we've included that. And I think this is a good example of how the designers have been creative in working with the site. So we had sort of a grade change here, and they used that creatively and are thinking of making it kind of a rock climbing wall as a way for kids to access the playground. There is, not in view on this site, but a more traditional way to access the playground. So the superintendent doesn't have to climb up the rock walls, hopefully, to get up there. And then this is a view from Gay Street from the north entrance. And another view from Gay Street, just pulled back a little further so that you can see the playing fields. Oops. And the floor plans you've seen before, so I won't belabor it, but we have designed the building to be in grade level neighborhoods here around an extended learning area. We really were interested in creating a small school sense in this building. And it's also been designed, as I mentioned, to be able to separate what we consider the private academic space from the public space. After hours, for instance, the private area of the building could be secured. What you'll also see is, this is the second floor plan, you see throughout the building these pink spaces. Those represent breakout areas or special education space. The building is a very exciting opportunity to have some specially designed space for some of our district-wide elementary special education programs. We have programs referred to as Lower and Upper WABA, the Westwood Applied Behavioral Analysis Program, that are currently located in Downey. The plan is to move those programs to this building, to specially designed space, which also has the impact of freeing up some classroom space at Downey right now, which will also be beneficial to the Downey community, we think. And I'm turning it back to Maya.
All right, thanks, Emily. So as you can see, when you see this space, you can see just how excited we are by it, that our kids are going to be able to learn in this space. It's a building that accommodates modern educational needs, things, you know, it functions the way we teach these kids, both for the general and the special education population, but it's still beautiful, it's inviting, it's warm, and we just love the look of it. We love the design of it. At the same time, throughout this process, we have been extremely conscious of cost, which I think is evident when you look at the cost of other projects. So in front of you, you've got 4 other projects. These are the same projects that we showed you last March for comparison purposes. And we chose these projects specifically because these are elementary school projects working with the MSBA and neighboring communities on a very similar timeline as us. We have updated numbers here. So as you can see, the number I'm focusing on here is the cost per square foot of the building. So the last time we showed the slide, our cost per square foot was $622. We've come down $1, so we're $621. And pretty much across the board, every other project has actually gone up. Medfield, Westboro, Wellesley, and Ashland are all between $650 and almost $700 per square foot. So we are, you know, significantly below the comparisons that we've been working on. I also wanted to point out sort of where these are in the process. Medfield is on the same timeline as we are, as is Wellesley. Westboro was approved, and it looks like they should be taking occupancy right now of their building. And Ashland was just approved by the town last January, resoundingly by the community. So, you know, we're happy for Ashland. We're hoping for the same result here. But I think this is we're very proud of this slide because, you know, a lot of people have said to us, please don't over-design the building. Please don't make it look too nice. And I think what this slide proves is that you can actually build a really beautiful building for the same cost as you would a utilitarian building, and still be, you know, either at or below market, which is where we are. So we're very proud of this slide. So getting down into the cost itself. The total cost of the project is $87.8 million. This number has actually not changed since we showed it to you last March. Things that have changed since our March meeting. First of all, as you remember, we asked for bridge funding in May. That was approved at the spring 2021 town meeting. The feasibility study clearly was approved way back at the spring 2018 town meeting. So what we're going to be asking for in the fall, in October, in a month, is the $84.6 million number you see on the screen. This is the balance of what's left from that total project cost. The other thing, as Emily mentioned, is the MSBA has approved a grant of up to $18.2 million subject to town approval of the project. So that brings the total project cost to town residents to $69.5 million. One thing I want to stress here is that, as everybody knows, particularly if you've been trying to do any work on your home, construction costs in the past 9 months to a year have skyrocketed. And we are very conscious of this. We are very worried about this. So when we were about 50% through design development, Compass and Doran Whittier sent out the project to a cost estimator. The cost estimators came back and said, nope, you're still on budget, you're still on target. When we were 100% done, which is just a couple weeks ago with the design development, we sent it back out again to make sure. And again, they came back with very, very minor tweaks that we could do to value engineer it and still stay on budget. So we're very happy with that result. I think it shows the great work of Doran Whittier and Compass in keeping us on budget. And as we promised, since, as we promised at the May town meeting, as of now, we were still on target for schedule, we're still on target for budget. And that was largely due to that bridge funding that we were able to secure in the spring. So this is the debt estimate slide. I'm not going to spend too much time here because Pam, I know, will go into detail in this. But one thing that I think is important here is that given recent bond purchases by the town and our strong tax rating, we understand now that we feel that we could use a 2% interest rate as an estimated interest rate for this project. We did want to show 3% and 4%, and we were, as you recall, using 4% back in March. But given the current market, and I'll let Pam explain this a little bit more, but I understand the town is comfortable really looking at a 2% interest rate, in which case the cost of this project would result in about $55 per $100,000 of home value. For the average home, that's $837,300 in value. That means that the annual cost of this project is $462. Again, just as a reminder, the debt from the high school will be rolling off in 2023. So those numbers below will show you the net effect, the impact of that roll-off. So you would just subtract $7.20 from that $55 number. So we're looking at really an impact of about $47.80 per $100,000 of home value per year. So as we've discussed, this project does require the town to authorize a debt exclusion at this fall's town's meeting. So I know you've probably seen this slide before, but we just wanted to remind everybody at the last time the schools have gone before the town to ask for either a debt exclusion or override. So the last time we went to the town for anything over Proposition 2.5 was back in 2008, so about 13 years ago. And that was an override to meet operational budget needs. Since then, we've been able to work within our budget within Proposition 2.5. Before that, 2002 was the last time we came for a debt exclusion for a capital project. So it's been almost 20 years since we've asked the town for a debt exclusion for a capital project, and that was to construct the new Westwood High. And clearly before that, we were coming before the town fairly frequently to finance the renovations of Martha Jones Downey and the middle school. So it's been a while. So why can't we just fix Hanlon? We've heard this question a lot as well. As a reminder, this is a project for both Hanlon and Deerfield. So fixing Hanlon would only address the facility needs of one school. And actually, and fixing just Hanlon would actually generate more issues for us. The current Hanlon building can't accommodate the estimated future population growth of our students. So we'll need a new solution at that time. Whenever we hit that growth mark, maybe it's an addition to Hanlon, maybe it's adding more modular classrooms at the back of Hanlon, but we would have to accommodate that growth in some way. Both Deerfield and Hanlon currently have less than 200 students each. And as we've mentioned in prior meetings, that small school population does create problems with our educational delivery in terms of class size. Some classes are too big, some classes are too small. You don't have the flexibility to really kind of spread them out the way you want to. And with the operation of the schools, and fixing Hanlon only wouldn't solve that issue as well. And finally, as you can see, it turns out that a Hanlon only project is the least cost-effective option on a per student basis. So moving on, I want to stress here, there really is no do nothing option. what I mean by that is that the Hanlon Deerfield project, this new elementary school, is the district's capital plan for these two schools. Without the project, we'll still need to address the issues within the buildings. And at some point, our repairs are going to be significant enough to trigger a requirement that we bring these buildings into compliance with building codes, which means that if we've run the numbers on that, and that means that we would need to spend a combined $41 million just to get Hanlon and Deerfield both up into compliance with code. We wouldn't have the educational benefits that Emily was talking about with respect to special education and also the modern delivery methods that we're using now. And we also won't have any of the community benefits like the new gym, the new fields, the new school. That's just to bring the buildings up into code. If you compare that with the assessed values of the buildings, which total about $10.4 million, it doesn't seem to make sense to pour $40 million into buildings that are only worth 10. So to frame this a different way, the school's annual capital budget for all 7 schools is $1 million. So one way or another, we will end up needing a debt exclusion or an override to deal with these schools. We'd be back here asking for that debt exclusion. So here we have a really unique opportunity to get $18.2 million from the state to offset the cost of this project. And we're solving for 2 schools in 1 building. So I just really feel that it's really in the best fiscal interest of the town to move forward with the project. So where are we? So here's the current project schedule. As we mentioned, in May 2021 at the annual town meeting, the town approved the bridge funding. So after that, we did move into design development, and we have those design development documents. We are now moving up to October 2021, where we'll have the special town meeting and the special election. Assuming both of those pass favorably, we would immediately move into bid documents and create documents that we would put out to bid for contractors. We would bring a contractor onto the project, and in July 2022, so next summer, we would start construction. The construction would last until February 2024, and that's the building and sort of the site construction. At that time, students and teachers would move into the building, and we enter phase 3, where we would move them out of the existing Hanlon, demolish and go into phase 4, which is the site construction, where we demolish the existing Hanlon, build the parking lot, finalize the fields, and August 2024, we would have project completion. So what about Sheehan? As Emily mentioned, we do have 3 schools that need repairs. And as we've discussed before, I think with this group, we will need to address Sheehan for the same reasons that we discussed above regarding Hanlon and Deerfield. Just in May 2021, the school committee heard the results of a high-level design study for Sheehan that it commissioned back in 2020. And in June, this is a new development, the school department submitted a statement of interest for Sheehan to the MSBA. I'm hoping to get into the same program, but this time for Sheehan. So as you may recall, we had and in February 2022, we should hear back on whether or not Westwood has been accepted into that program. As you may recall, we did put a potential timeline up in front of this group and in front of the community. That timeline you see on your screen here. I don't want to spend too much time on this because if we do get into the MSBA program, this timeline will change. It will actually be extended. The MSBA process takes longer than a typical build construction project would. But this is the potential timeline without MSBA participation, and we feel it is a realistic timeline for the project. So what's next? Well, October 18th is the special town meeting. October 26th is the special town election, and we will see where we go from there. We've put a website up on the screen here for people who have more information. This is our website. Every presentation we've ever given, every meeting we've ever had, the minutes of every meeting we've ever had, the agenda, all of the information we've provided is all on that website. We also have a place where you can submit questions. A lot of residents have taken advantage of that and have sent us questions that we've answered. And there's also an FAQ on that section. On that website for people just to sort of scroll through and just answer the most commonly asked questions. So I think that's it for us. And at this point, we'd like to open it up to questions from you.
Okay, thank you both very much. So I don't see any questions from FinCom members in the chat. So does any FinCom member, raise your hand, Tom?
Tommy Kilgare.
Or Diane, if it's okay, I'll get the ball rolling.
Oh,
I can't hear what you just said.
I'm going to mute. Tom
Diane,
Kilgare.
I think that room is on mute.
Okay.
No.
You can hear me, can you not? Can anyone hear me? Raise your hand.
Is
Want me to
anybody able
unmute?
to hear me? I hope
No.
someone is able to hear
Let
me.
me unmute
I
then.
think Diane's still on mute.
Diane, you're still on mute.
Hello, can you hear me now? Can anyone hear
Okay.
me?
Go ahead, use mine.
Hi, can anyone hear me?
I think Tommy was first.
Can anyone hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Diane.
Okay, great, thank you. I feel like I'm at my cell commercial. Okay, Tom Kilgara raised his hand. Tom.
Thank you. Mayor, thanks very much. That was great. Quick question, not to get ahead of ourselves, but the MSBA, is the town handicapped at all by already having a project approved by them in terms of them evaluating or their decision-making on a second project for the same town?
You mean for Sheehan?
For Sheehan, yeah.
So it's a great question. Unfortunately, yes, we think that it is. The only school district, when we submitted this statement of interest, we haven't even gotten town approval for this project. If it is approved, when they accept us in, we wouldn't have even broken ground on the project. So we're not too optimistic that we would be accepted, certainly on our first try into the MSBA. We could certainly keep applying and trying again. And as we move further through this project, we may have a better shot. The only school districts where you really see multiple MSBA projects going on at once are school districts like Boston or Worcester, places where they just have so many schools that it makes sense for the MSBA to fund them. But, we thought it would be fiscally irresponsible not to at least try. So
Sure.
We're trying. It doesn't really affect any timeline that we have. It didn't affect that potential timeline that we put up on the screen. So we thought, let's just try it, see what happens. Maybe we'll get some feedback from the MSBA and we would go from there and see what happens.
Great, thank you. So a quick part two to that question then. So, because I just wanted to, be clear on it then, if just in case some people may think in town that if people are of the opinion that Sheehan needs a replacement more than the Hanlon Deerfield super school, then maybe people might vote against the Hanlon Deerfield project, thinking that the Sheehan project would happen. So that's kind of one reason I asked the question. And then the other part is that I think it's my understanding that a few years ago, some of the towns they were invited into the program, they were selected, but then their town voted against it, and then that opportunity went away and didn't come back. They then, I think it was, and forgive me, I forget what town it was, but they then approved, I think the town was ready to go ahead with it maybe a year or two later, but they weren't allowed back in the program. They got rejected. You know what town I'm talking about?
I don't know what town. Maybe Emily, do you know?
I think it's Lincoln you're referring to, but
Lincoln, that's right. Yeah, it was Lincoln.
So one of the things that is key to the MSBA is community support. They have been following very closely the community engagement that we've been doing, the outreach and the response we've gotten from the community. And they watch that because to your point, they don't want to waste time in a community where there's no support for the project. I think if this were voted down in the fall, in October, and then we still have the Sheehan pending, I think that would definitely, I think, hurt the Sheehan application even more than just having this project go forward, because there clearly would not be an appetite in the town for a new school building, and that would reflect on the Sheehan application as well, is my guess. I don't know, Chin, you know the MSBA better than I do. Do you have thoughts on this?
MSBA basically wants the community support because it's a waste of everybody's time that is for them to participate otherwise. And the Lincoln case is basically Lincoln went back to MSBA and MSBA says, okay, go back to the line and start over. And so you lose good 3-4 years at a minimum. And then the 3-4 years also has escalation impact. So your cost does not go away, it just goes, keep going up. And then, but right now you do have the opportunity to participate with MSBA, and MSBA has this, and Pam can get into this a little bit more in detail, that this is a very good program because their reimbursement is ongoing upfront. You spend the money, then they pay you back. And in fact, the town, MSBA signed an agreement with the town, and in fact, the town already got about $500,000 of the $18.2 million total maximum reimbursement from the MSBA already. So to walk away from that is, you're walking away from a very good opportunity. That's the way I would describe it.
Thanks, Jen.
Okay, thank you.
That opportunity probably wouldn't happen again. And the net math between the new building and the total repair option is about $28 million. And,
Around that, yep.
And the net result of what you have is obviously a big difference. New building versus Band-Aid buildings.
Yes.
All right, thanks very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Tom.
Any other comments? If FinCom, raise your hand if you have any comments or questions at this point in time.
We can't unmute you.
Hello?
Hi, Diane. We can hear you.
Okay. Any other FinCom member with questions or comments? If you could raise your hand.
Yeah, I had a question. So thanks so much for the presentation, Emily and Maya. Very interesting. What I'm interested in finding out is the 18.2 million from the MSBA. Is that consistent with what those comps you showed us were for like Medfield, Westboro, Wellesley, and Ashland?
So I don't have that information. Our effective reimbursement rate is about 21.2%, and I believe that is pretty consistent with the reimbursement that towns of our economic position have seen. The way they determine the economic reimbursement is based on it's based on a lot of things. It's a very complicated formula, but one of the things they look at is sort of the need of the town itself. And I think, and Chin or Tim, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but when we started this process, I remember Tim saying to me, you know, if the net effect that you will probably see, the effective rate you'll probably see is between 20 and 22%. So I would say Tim hit it on the head, clearly knowing that. But I don't know, Tim or Tim, do you have any other color on this?
No, I mean, I think you were absolutely right. It's so the base reimbursement rate's based on a bunch of, you know, socioeconomic factors. So every town's different. And that list that you saw, those towns, you know, the Wellesley, for instance, would be probably maybe even less than Westwood, and then, you know, maybe Ashland on one side might be a little more. But I think within a gap, you're pretty much all around, you know, 5 or 6% difference. My guess is they're not that significantly different.
Yeah. So this is about as good as we're going to do.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and if I could jump in and say that in addition to our base reimbursement rate that's based on those economic factors, there are 2 opportunities to get like bonus points. And so we've maximized the 2% additional reimbursement for meeting our sustainability goals. And then you can get up to an additional 2%. We got 1.93%. That's related to maintenance. And basically what that is we went through a process to demonstrate our history, our record in Westwood of maintaining our buildings. And they granted us an additional 1.93% based on that record. I think they think we're a good investment.
Which I would say that just is probably the best we've seen in the 20 schools we've worked on. in the last 10 years. I would say that 1.93. Normally that number is, 1.5 to 1.7.
So that's kudos to our operations team.
Okay, we have a question here in the room from Jim.
Thank you. Yeah, just going backwards a little bit.
Yes, I have a
Into this
question.
current school year, what are the current COVID protocols if a
Diane, I'm
student
still having
tests
difficulty
positive?
hearing you.
Can you not hear me?
Peter Ittig needs to start talking. Can you mute him?
Shall I proceed with my question?
You can,
Peter, can you mute yourself, please?
I just muted him.
can you
Yeah,
hear,
Diane,
can you
we
hear
can't,
me?
we can't hear Jim, so if he could come to the microphone.
Jim, go to the microphone.
Go get what? Good, take Peter's question.
You can say it now. Go ahead.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Just, as I said, just backing up a little bit. Going into the current school year, what are the COVID protocols if a student tests positive? Are you going to have to close the schools, and are we going back to online learning, or are we done with that?
No, we have no plan to go to remote learning. In fact, the Department of Education has been clear that that isn't one of the options this year.
Okay. And then, that being the case, if we don't get COVID behind us, is there any part of the school that we won't be able to utilize to its full potential?
You mean any part of the new building?
The new
that we
building,
wouldn't be
correct,
able-
yeah.
No, I don't think so. In fact, I think honestly that the new building, I hope we're not still dealing with what we're dealing with now, but if we were, then I think the new building would be an improvement. So certainly from like a HVAC ventilation perspective, the new building is a huge improvement over our current situations at Hanlon and Deerfield, where our ventilation strategy, to be blunt, is pretty much open windows. So that would be a benefit, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
Can
just to
I-
add on that, the ventilation system at the new school is actually designed with COVID in mind. So and Chin can speak more to the specifics of it, but it's an extremely powerful ventilation system that we have also a UV filtration system as an alternate, where if we come in budget favorable, we could add that. So the air circulating in there is a huge improvement over what we have circulating in our current schools. In addition, in the nurse's office, we've designed it so that the nurse's office has a separate entrance and can be sealed off and has its own HVAC in the event that we need that to be a sick room or a safe room. So in some ways, actually going through this through COVID has definitely influenced the design of the building. Chin, I don't know if you want to talk more about HVAC.
So what you have there is that you're going beyond the CDC recommendation for new building. CDC recommendation for new building to address COVID is a filter rating of MER 13, and then we're putting in as a base as a MER 14. So we're doing much better in terms of filtration, and then we have the capacity to bring in much more outside air than any of your current building, and then the delivery system is in a way so that it extracts all the airborne particles out of the room and then get it out of the building so that it never, so that in room A, if somebody sneezes in room A, it will never get transmitted to the next room over. It just gets all out of the building. So there a lot of thoughts and planning have gone into that, and then that's all in the budget right now.
All right, just one more going back to Sheehan. Given that it's, for all intents and purposes, similar size to Hanlon, would you guesstimate that the cost of the Sheehan project would be similar to the cost of the new Hanlon only school that you projected? The $59 million?
I'm going to punt that to Compass. They know more about numbers than I do.
It would be a similar design enrollment, right?
Yeah, it would be, I think,
yes.
310 we were looking at.
So the 310 that we should put a caveat on that is that is with an assumption of if it was done on the same schedule. So because this is going to be pushed back a little bit, and then so at the moment we don't have a end date for Sheehan, but we should put a caveat that some additional escalation will need to be factored in for the delay in time.
I do think that Jim's point that the Sheehan school would be about the same size as
The
what.
cost will be similar, yes, in terms of the 60 million-ish, and then the unknown at the moment is when is that going to get done? So that need to be factored in if you want to be more precise.
Okay, thank you. If anyone else from FinCom has a question, please raise your hand.
I guess my other question is, piggybacking off that question, so we could reasonably assume if we were to embark on a similar project for Martha Jones and Sheehan, that the cost would be pretty consistent with what we're seeing with Hanlon and Deerfield, potentially minus that 18.2 MSBA grant.
I mean, consolidating Martha Jones and Sheehan?
Yeah.
I think that would probably result in a bigger school because Sheehan, as I mentioned, Sheehan and Deerfield are smaller than Martha Jones and Sheehan. Sorry, Hanlon and Deerfield are smaller than Martha Jones and Sheehan. So that would probably result in a bigger school than the one we've designed for Hanlon Deerfield.
But I just want to, I'm sorry, I want to make sure I understand the question.
Go ahead.
We're really not contemplating a consolidation of
any other schools.
Right.
No, Martha Jones was fully renovated in the early 2000s. Sheehan is in a different state.
And Downey is similarly in good shape. So it's really Sheehan is the one that needs repair.
Right.
Okay.
Alex, I think you had a question?
Yes.
Did you guys ever consider putting Sheehan into this Hanlon Deerfield bucket?
We did. So we did, I think it was an 18-month feasibility study. And we studied Hanlon only, Hanlon Deerfield consolidations at the Hanlon site. We studied Hanlon Sheehan consolidation at the Hanlon site and Hanlon Sheehan consolidation at the Sheehan site. So we looked at all those permutations. As part of that process, we originally had 15 different options. We then went through a process to shortlist it to 7, and ultimately this was determined to be the best option based on those different categories, that criteria that we took a look at. It turns out that the Hanlon site proved to be a much more favorable site for a variety of reasons. And in addition, when you look at the impact of what would have to happen in terms of redistricting to consolidate Hanlon and Sheehan at the Sheehan site, it was very clear that the Hanlon Deerfield consolidation at the Hanlon site was the better option.
Okay, Alex, you had a question.
Yes, thank you. Maya and Emily, great presentation. Thanks for all the details you shared. Two unrelated questions. I'll just share the 2 questions and you can answer in whatever order makes sense. But the first, I noticed from a sustainability standpoint, geothermal was in the plans, but solar was not in the plans. So I'd love to know why we aren't considering solar panels on the roof or on the property, obviously for sustainability purposes, but also for long-term variable operational costs going forward from an electric standpoint. The second question is, are there any thoughts or plans into what we expect to see in place of the Deerfield site or property once the consolidation and renovation is complete? Obviously, it'd be a small contribution back to the town if it were a long-term lease or used for some kind of private use, but I just wanted to know if there's any plans in the pipe or thoughts on that. Thank you.
Sure. So with respect to the solar, the roof actually is PV panel ready. So it's ready, it's going to be ready to accept solar panels. The cost of purchasing solar panels is not in the budget. It was not, we discussed it with the SBC, but we decided that would significantly increase the price of the project. However, we are looking at programs where we may be able to get PV panels for zero cost and install them. And as well as the town, I know, is looking at the Hanlon Deerfield School as a potential for incorporating that into its energy overall strategy. So the Hanlon Deerfield site is certainly a great place to put PV panels. The roof is ready to accept them. That's designed specially, for that purpose. But the cost of the panels themselves they just didn't make it into the budget. And then with respect to the Deerfield, go ahead.
From the solar piece, was there a payback period calculation? Like, the increased price up front would pay itself back in, call it 10 years of rates? I just didn't know if that was part of the calculation, the calculus as well.
Yeah, it was part of the discussion. We looked at, it wasn't just the price of the solar panels. We sort of looked at the whole project, and especially given that the town and Tom Philbin has their own energy strategy, it just didn't make sense to incorporate that cost into this particular project.
Lauren, I believe you had a question.
The question about the Deerfield School, I think, was your other question. So, right now, the Deerfield is obviously in sort of the control of the school department. What would happen is after the Deerfield students moved into the new building, the school department would need to assess whether or not there is some use to the school department for that building. And so, for example, if we had a sense of where we were going with Sheehan, there might be a scenario in which it would be valuable to have some swing space at the Deerfield School. However, when it's clear that there is no longer a school-based use for Deerfield, then at that point, the Deerfield property would revert back to the town, and it would be the decision of the town and the community to decide what to do with that property.
Thanks. So the audio in the room is not working. They are working on it, but that's why we're trying to use the computer audio here. Lauren, I believe you had a question.
Yeah. So a couple questions here. So do you guys happen to know, you might not, but the Westboro school that's basically completed, you might not know, but was it over budget? Was it on target? Was it what they expected?
Chin, you want to take that one?
Yeah. That project, I think, is just about on budget because it was run by a very, the committee was very hands-on. Even though they run into a whole bunch of issues, including the whole COVID issue that impacted them a little bit more. I think the overall budget is within. I don't believe that there's a significant any over budget issue that we have heard about.
Okay, and
It's
was it all?
not our project. It is actually our parent company's project, but we haven't. It's not from our team's project, so.
We could get the detail for you, but we don't have the number at our hand.
Okay, all right, and I'm just curious on when you guys were playing the numbers, did you do for instance, over under of a percentage of just playing okay, if we do happen to go about 5% over, how is it going to impact the town? If we happen to actually go 5% under, how is it going to impact the town and the community? Has this been discussed, I'm assuming?
So in the MSBA budget that we built up, that the overall, the 87,820 number, that there are locations where we build in contingencies to cover unforeseen events. And we are fairly confident that we can maintain the budget. And the one thing that I would say is that this past couple months that the DD process that we went to two estimate and then basically come in right on budget, that the design team just have to make some minor adjustment. They did a pretty good job in that because frequently, especially with the market so volatile right now, what you guys are not hearing about is that nobody's coming back saying that, oh, the steel price went up so much that we have to, basically the design team took strategies to get the building to be within, to absorb that volatility of the steel price increase, and then we were able to maintain the budget.
Okay.
So we plan to continue doing that.
Okay, all right. And then, sorry, I just have a couple more questions here. If this building does pass and it, and the town wants it, longevity of the building until it starts, I don't want to say age showing, but like when it's like, when again are we gonna, is this gonna, how many years do we say estimate?
So the MSBA part of the base requirement is that they say that the building should be designed for either 40 or 50-year range. Now, there's a caveat that there are some systems that won't last that long. That just the technology, like roofing is usually somewhere between 20 to 30 years. So you won't quite make it to the 40-year mark. But the major system you should be able to expect to be able to last a long time. On building envelope usually has a minimum of 40 years in terms of windows and the seals around it, and those are not one. So at the moment let's put it this way: MSBA makes sure that we design the building to the most reasonable longevity. This is a long-term project. They understand that. And they understand that the longevity is an issue, and then so you would expect somewhere between 30 to 40 years before you have to do major renovation, unless something else happens.
And we, as a committee, are also making decisions. So, for example, we had originally in the exterior design, they had one type of material around the building, and there was an alternative that we didn't, that was beautiful, but really we were really drawn to this first one. But that one had a 10-year warranty. And the second material had a 70-year warranty, and the SBC went with the second material because we really feel that this is a school for the future, and we do not want to be in this position, 20 years from now saying Hanlon is falling apart. We need to do something about it. So not only are they designing it, but we as a committee are making decisions to ensure the longevity of the building.
We're talking about this as a generational project.
Yes.
Okay, all right. And last question. So I just want to get the timeline straight in my head here. So just if this, the school, the Deerfield Hanlon, projected finish is 2024 August, right? And so then I know with Sheehan that it all depends on if we get accepted into the MSBA and everything. So we're looking at about another couple of years, then we'll be asking, the town needs to then fund more money for another school project, correct?
For Sheehan, yes.
Okay,
so it depends whether or not we're in the MSBA, and honestly, it depends what the town is willing to accept, right? The timeline that the town is willing to accept. At the end of the day, it comes down to the residents and what they want to do.
So there's
go ahead.
There's a possibility. So we're, so yes, this is, all right. So deducting the 18 million, so we're going to be paying about 70 million for this Deerfield Hanlon, and then will come probably in a couple of years another 60 million project for Sheehan, correct?
I wouldn't say a couple years. If we're in the MSBA, then I think it would be, 2021? More like 4 or 5 years. Okay. If we are not in the MSBA, the way we had proposed it is we would do it in stages. So we would do, I think the potential timeline was spring 2023, where we would ask the town for design through bidding money. And then fall 2024, a year and a half later, we would ask the town for the balance of the project. That was just the potential timeline that we put up there. We're not wed to that. It's literally what, the design team said, oh, this looks like it could work. But if we do the MSBA, if we go the MSBA route, all of those dates get pushed out because it's a much longer process.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you all. Emily and Maya, thank you. We're going to ask Pam to join us. She's already with us.
I have a couple of questions as well.
I think there's a few more people that want to speak, Diane.
I'm sorry?
I think there's a few more committee members that want to speak.
Oh, I didn't see any other hands. I'm sorry. Please raise your hand if you would like to spek.
I can't figure it out.
Okay, Peter, you would like to speak.
Yes, I have a couple of questions. One is, I'm interested in how much the proposed geothermal electric power plant will add to the cost of this project. And I'm actually somewhat skeptical that this is a cheaper way to generate electricity. If it was less expensive, I would expect the electric utilities to be doing it. I'm also curious about whether you have any estimates of the useful life of that geothermal electric power plant. But I have a second question as well, but I'd like to ask you to try to deal with that one first.
Yeah, Mayor, I'll take that
Yes,
question.
please.
So the geothermal plant is really the real technical term that there is that you're actually not generating electricity. You're using the earth as a heat sink. So in the summertime that you're rejecting heat into the ground, and then in the wintertime you're drawing heat in from the ground via the loops of water into the ground to service the building. It is one of the geothermal wells are easily 40 years of life. Westboro has wells that are 20 plus years that they have been operating on. And then the only thing that they have to change was the pumps need to be changed out. And that was due to a water quality issue, which that is, it's a long story, but the thing is that even when they made that mistake in their design, the only thing that wear out was the pump and the heat exchanger. And then the 20-year is not unusual for pumps to be replaced. And so we do expect that the life of the system to be basically, you should be able to expect 40 years of service or more on the wells. The pumps itself will be that would be the I would say is in the 30-year range, and it is the most this building is actually the most energy efficient building, and even the energy modeling consultant, actually one of them lives in Westwood, had told me that she hasn't seen one in Massachusetts performing as good as this one.
You didn't mention what this would cost?
The cost, I don't have that number off the top of my head, but I think this is in the additional $3 million plus minus range. And I don't have, that's about the range of the geothermal well system.
But that, I mean, that's the total cost of that system. There's a delta. We would have, if we didn't have this system, we'd have to put in another system. And so I don't know what
I'm sorry,
a 3 million additional.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's a payback, which we'd have to look it up because it was a while ago we did it, but I think it was in the 7 years, and then it basically goes positive.
Right. I do have an additional question. I'm somewhat concerned about the design life of the schools. In fact, at the select board meeting last week, Pam mentioned that a reason for the use of 30-year bonds is to better match the life of the asset. And in my experience, colleges and universities mostly do not tear down buildings every few decades, as we are doing for schools in Westwood. I've had lectures in lecture halls that are very old. They are not torn down when they need a new furnace or roof repair or plumbing repairs. This is also true for the homes of the taxpayers. They are not, homeowners do not tear down the house when they need a new furnace or a new roof or new windows. And I'm concerned about whether these schools are built to last and about how long the new Hanlon School is expected to last.
Well, I mean, these schools, as we've mentioned, were built in the 1950s. So at this point, they've lasted about 70 years. And as Emily mentioned, we have been maintaining them very well to the point where, we're getting extra bonus points and the MSBA reimbursement for them. But just like anything, there comes a point where their function it's just not worth it to keep pouring money into them. And we have run these numbers up and down and looked at the cost of replacements and looked at the cost of, I mean, we have the numbers here, right? It costs $40 million if we don't want to knock these buildings down. And that would be the alternative, right? The alternative to this project is to spend $40 million to bring these up into code. But again, we think that the school, at least I think, as a member of the school committee, as a parent in this community, I think that our students deserve better than just trying to bring old buildings up into code. And if we have the opportunity with money from the state to provide a high quality, beautiful, modern building where we can really deliver the education that Westwood has become known for, we should take that opportunity. I mean, I know I expect this building to last another 50 years. I hope that's how we're designing it. But at some point, this building too will need to be replaced. And I don't think that's.
If I could just follow up on that, I certainly at the presentation with the select board didn't suggest that we were doing a 30-year bond because we would be tearing the school down in 30 years. We were talking in terms of we were doing a longer bond than what the town often does. We try when we can just to do 10-year bonds for any of our debt so that that debt is dropping off and giving future town meetings their opportunity to come with new projects. The high school was a 20-year bond. The state extended the borrowing period that towns are authorized to do, and we can now do a 30-year bond. So the statement was made that that's a much more appropriate timeline for a long-term asset like this, just like with your house, where most people do a mortgage on their home for a 30-year term. So that's where the statement was made at that meeting, and we're going to look at that when we go through some of the debt. Thank you.
Mayor, let me just add one other thing to the question is that the committee had looked at the renovation and addition to bring the building up to code and then bring in the additional space that is necessary to provide the education that is appropriate for the current delivery. And every time when we looked at that the cost of that renovation addition often always came out to be actually higher in cost because of some of the inefficiency that we had to work around existing building. And then the committee actually looked at all these options and then the mayor, there was one slide that it actually shows that on a per student basis, this project is actually one of the lowest cost option that is available compared to the renovation only or compared to the renovation addition to bring it up to the current code. That this is still the lowest cost option per student.
Okay, Peter, you all set there? Okay, George Laham, I'm sorry, George, you actually raised your hand in Zoom, and I didn't see it.
I can't figure the Zoom thing out. I've been working with it at work. I still can't figure it out. I'm sorry. I have a couple of questions. I've been jotting down some notes. First of all, Maya, Emily, great presentation. I did want to confirm one of the numbers you said. Currently, Deerfield and Hanlon have about 200 kids at it. The new school will have a max capacity of about 560.
That's correct.
Yeah. Right. And I really like the fact that it is not just a school, neighborhood issue. You've definitely integrated the entire town in it and how it will impact the town. I'm a little suspect or questioning it. Westwood was 621 a square foot cost, Medfield 670, Wellesley 695. I'm sure, Emily, you saw the Boston Magazine. Westwood was rated in the, I think either 14 or 15, where,
14,
ranked higher.
14, George.
I'm sorry, 14. We're ranked pretty high, and maybe definitely higher than Medfield, and I'm not sure where Wellesley was. Are we shorting ourselves? And is the 621 a reasonable number, or is it a big number to get it passed, and then there may be overages? And so that's, I guess, my first question.
So the 621 is a real number. The one thing about the MSBA process is you submit to them your budget and they hold you to that budget. So this isn't going to be a bait and switch scenario, right? We're not telling everybody it's a $621 per square foot building, but really in the back of our minds, we're building a $650 square foot building, or that's what it ends up Right, or that's what it ends up being at the end of the day. The MSBA will really hold us to that budget, and quite frankly, I will as well, because the one thing I've been harping on from the start is budget, 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 and I think the architect is that to me is key. I understand the impact of this project. I understand it is the biggest project Westwood has done. It's expensive, and I know that, but so for that reason, this committee has been very, very cost conscious. At the same time, I don't think we're shorting ourselves. I think we're building a beautiful building, and it's got the things that we need. So I'm actually really happy with the design. I'm really happy with the way the budget looks. And that's my personal opinion.
I mean, you remember when the Thurston was redone? It was redone, yes. And it had to stop, and then they had it redone again. And kids like me were actually going to school in a construction zone. I know now that won't be possible, but I just was, concerned that. Also, this may be for the project manager. What is the percentage of contingency that was put into the budget?
The percentage of contingency, there are two different buckets of contingency. For the construction costs, I think that that was a 5% contingency. And then there's another line for the design, the soft cost contingency. And that number, I don't remember exactly what that percentage is.
Okay, and my last question is, I mean, this is maybe just me, and please tell me if I'm wrong. Total project cost is about $87.8 million. The MSBA is going to reimburse about 18.2, bringing the number down to 69.5. And, if we don't accept this or the town decides not to go, we do run the risk of, I don't want to use it, but like blackballing ourselves from potentially getting another MSBA loan. But when the bottom line comes in, it's a $69.5 million project. We can do that, or the town can decide not to, and then the town won't have a choice to bring $41.7 million bare minimum repairs to bring it to code. And I think Maya was correct. Westwood's not a bare minimum education community. I don't live here for bare minimum. I don't want that, and I don't think anybody else does. And so the bottom line is, I think the real question is, do we want to pay $27 million for a brand new building? $27.8 million for a brand new building? Because that's really the additional cost. I mean, if that $41.7 million number is accurate to bring the two schools to the bare minimum code, I mean, the real question I think that needs to be presented is, do we want to spend $41 million and do a bare minimum job? Or do we want to spend an extra 27.8 and do it right? I mean, but again, that's my interpretation. So, I would like to hear from everybody what they think on that. Or not.
What do you mean, everybody?
I would like to ask another question about the cost.
Can we finish the question that I had, Peter? Unless nobody has any thoughts on it.
To stop talking until they raise their hand.
I agree with you, George. I'm with you.
Thanks.
I agree with you too. I mean, I think the other thing that came up tonight that was a little bit of a newer thing is this is reaching beyond, just the Deerfield Hanlon. I can't remember what the acronym was, but the classrooms moving from Downey over. I mean, WABA, like that has an impact on Downey capacity, which is stretched. So I think, it's really, you're really trying to touch as much of the community as you can with the building.
I mean, and for a Downey parent, I will tell you, Downey is not stretched. Downey is just like, it's busting at the seams. Kids are meeting, and there's a classroom in the solarium. I'm not criticizing it. They're doing what they have to do to get it done, but Downey is busting at the seams, and the classroom size at the lower levels is 3 classrooms each, while the upper level 4 and 5 is only at 2 classrooms. So the school's going to continue, it appears, to get bigger and have 3 classrooms per grade. So Downey's going to be busting out. So this would alleviate, I think, is what I heard, this would alleviate some of the space by moving the WABA program there. I'm not sure if the PR program or other programs would stay, but I mean, it's going to help not just the people that live in those neighborhoods, the Gay Street and the Birch Street areas. It's going to help the whole town.
Okay, so I'm going to move us along, if people don't mind.
Thanks, Tom.
George Hertz, you had a question, I believe, so George.
Can you hear me?
George Hertz?
Every time this presentation goes before the board, you bring up this point. And I absolutely agree with you. And I think maybe the school board should put something in their presentation for the town so that they can see those numbers and it can be presented that way, because I think it would make a difference in the decision that the town has on this project. I think it's a very good point.
Okay. Emily, you can share my notes this time. I shared plenty of yours in the past.
Okay, great. I'm gonna move us along. We had one more member of the committee that wanted to make a comment. I believe that was George Hertz. George, did you want to make a comment?
Question about the cost.
Peter, you've already spoken. Can we let the rest of the committee speak first? George Hertz, did you have a comment?
No, I don't have any main comments right now. I think I would just say that I think the presentation has been excellent, well thought out and well focused. It is a bit fascinating to, hear people, raise the concerns, especially about the Sheehan. But I certainly at this point in time am very impressed. I think the cost analysis, we've worked with the with the consultants in the past, and they've been very accurate in the estimates. I guess the one observation I would make is there needs to be good, solid oversight, as we've done in the building of the high school and the new police and fire stations, and that hopefully will keep everything on budget. But I'm fairly well impressed with the presentation, and yet I also think there have been some very, very constructive comments that have been made by FinCom members, our consultants, and the school folks.
Okay, so we're just going to open it up for one more question from Peter, and then remember, we'll have a lot of chance next week to debate and have conversations about it. Peter, you had one more question.
I think you said that I may proceed. I'm still having difficulty understanding it, but I was interested in that cost table where you showed the cost per square foot, and for comparison schools, but you did not show the total cost for those comparison schools. In comparison with the $88 million for the proposed Hanlon. I wonder if you have the total cost numbers for those comparison schools.
So we don't have them. We can certainly provide them. The numbers can be a little misleading because these schools are all different sizes. That's why we broke it down to the cost per square foot, because that is sort of apples to apples. If we say the Westwood school, the Hanlon Deerfield school is 87, I'm forgetting the number, is 87 million, and the Ashland school is 55 million. The Ashland school may be much smaller than the Westwood school, and that explains the difference. So if you look at it at a cost per square foot basis, that gives you an accurate, apples to apples comparison of how much these schools cost. But we can certainly provide those numbers if that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you. Pam is here. I believe that Emily and Maya, you're going to hang in case there's questions at the end. Pam, if you want to go, please take the floor.
Great, thank you. Thank you all. Pam Dukeman, I'm the Assistant Town Administrator, Finance Director for the town. And we're just gonna now go through how would we actually, fund the school, pay for the school. And because it involves debt, and I know there are some new members on the committee this year, we're just gonna go through the town's debt position, how it works, what do we have outstanding in debt, a little bit on that. So I'm gonna just share my screen. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so just to walk through a little bit, as was stated, the new school project, the combined school, estimated to cost approximately $87 million, will be financed in two ways. The grant of about $18 million from the MSBA. And as was stated before, but I really want to emphasize, the MSBA pays their share as the project progresses. Want to point that out because that's very different than how they used to work for prior projects that we did with the MSBA. As was mentioned, our last project with MSBA was the high school 20 years ago. The program, the MSBA has completely changed. But back then, the MSBA had communities issue a bond for the whole cost of the project, and then they would pay a share of your principal and interest each year as a grant. That was really, an inefficient way for us all to operate. It resulted in extra interest and cost for both MSBA and towns. So a major change they've made is that they make their payment as they go on a monthly basis. And we have already had that in place now with the first two pieces of the project, the feasibility and the bridge funding. As that money is spent, it's submitted to MSBA on a monthly basis. They're paying their share as they go. So that's their piece. And again, very different than what we had in the past. The remaining balance would be with the town bond. We would have a sale of a long-term 30-year debt exempt bond. And just to mention a couple of things there, we're going to look at the town's debt, but the town actually goes out on a competitive market and sells a bond. I mentioned that the 30-year term is a longer term than we do for a lot of our debt. And we're doing that to make sure that not only are today's residents paying for this building, but those who move into town over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, they're certainly going to see the benefit of this building for the community. And we don't want them to not pay a share and have it all be on today's residents. We would also structure this bond as a level debt payment, meaning we would make the same debt, principal and interest total payment every year for the life of the bond, much like what you do with your mortgage payment. That again is a little bit different than we've done for some of our debt, where we typically have a level principal payment and a decline in interest. With that structure, you're paying more in your early years, and then it declines over the life of the bond, and you're paying less at the end period. Again, structuring it as a level debt spreads out the cost of this project, again, over today's residents and those who will be moving into our town over the next several years. I do just want to point out, as we're going to go through our debt, but we have recently been out to market in the spring. The town has an excellent credit rating, a AAA credit rating. That's really an important factor in doing everything we can do to get the best interest rates when we go out to sell. We had a bond sale in March 2021. At that time, we had an extensive update to our credit process, and our AAA rating was reaffirmed. The town sold a $7.7 million long-term bond. We had terms in that bond from 8 to 20 years, and the net interest rate we received on that bond was 1.14%. So a terrific low rate for that long-term bond. We also sold a short-term 1-year note for $4.5 million, and our net interest rate on that 0.24%. So really, some recent history of just some tremendous interest rates. Just to look further at the town's debt. So as I mentioned, we have a very strong credit rating. It's been an excellent interest rate environment. The town, as part of our budget process, we're always looking for how can we structure our debt so that we're bringing new debt on when old debt is dropping off, so that we're not always adding to existing debt, but we're having roll off of debt and new debt coming on. And that's why, as I mentioned, we like to structure, when we can, shorter term debt, 10 years if we can, so that we are always in this period of debt dropping off and new votes coming online. The next debt drop-off we have occurs in the current year, where we're making our last payment for a 10-year DPW road bond. That bond will be ending in the current year. On the right here, as I mentioned, we sold recently, got some terrific rates. Our previous sale to that was in 2016. We sold a $16 million bond. That did include up to a 30-year term. Our police station we financed over a 30-year period. And for that bond, we got 2.4% net interest rate. So again, an excellent rate for a long-term 30-year bond. Just finally looking, this chart shows the total amount of debt the town has outstanding at the end of every fiscal year, going back on this chart to 2003. So as shown in green, at the end of fiscal 21, which ended June 30th, 2021, the town had $32 million outstanding in debt. And I just want to point out, you can see when we issue new debt, that total debt outstanding will go up, but it quickly comes down as we start to make off payments over the next couple of years. So we had a peak here as we issued that new debt related to the police station. It's come down dramatically in the couple of years since. Previously, we had a peak when we issued the high school debt, and you can see that that came down as we made those payments. Just looking quickly at that $32 million of outstanding debt. So this chart shows you the individual components of that total $32 million outstanding. So we're describing what the project is. This column shows the net rate of interest, the date issued, the maturity date, the original amount of the bond issue, and what's remaining as of June 30th. So again, $32 million in total. We're showing here the projects that have been voted outside of Prop 2.5 and what is within Prop 2.5. So a debt exemption means that the town authorizes us to pay for the principal and interest every year for that project, the exact amount outside of the limits of Prop 2.5. And we've gone through before with this group, and we have some schedules in that town meeting book that we do that show the exact calculation of how Prop 2.5 works. But basically, we were allowed to raise that exact amount outside of that formula. When the bond ends, your ability to raise that tax ends. So right now, we have two projects outside of Prop 2.5, the high school bond and the library. We had previous other things voted as exempt debt. I think it was mentioned earlier. The Martha Jones, the Downey School, one of the middle school projects, previous road bonds. We've had other projects that were exempt from 2.5 that have been long completed and have come off the tax rolls. Again, in our town meeting book where we have all of our financial information, we list every one of those things that has been approved and what year it ended. So currently we just have the two items, the high school and the library. Looking at this right column here, the high school has $3.5 million remaining to be paid, and we will make our last payment on that next fiscal year. So in fiscal 23, that will end. And as mentioned, that was a 20-year bond. It was the largest borrowing and the largest construction project that the town had done ever. So certainly to be at the end of that and have that debt drop off is a tremendous accomplishment for the town. And I think the fact that it's dropping off and yet you look at that high school, it still functions as really a brand new, wonderful building, not only for the students, but for the community and everything that happens inside there. So that debt will be ending fiscal 23. The library has $3.9 million remaining. That was a 20-year bond. We're about halfway through that. That will end in fiscal 31. All of our other debt is within Prop 2.5. I do want to point out this, draw your attention to this rate of interest column. So we're showing here the net interest rate on every one of these borrowings. Starting at the bottom here with our most recent, as I mentioned, when we went out in the spring, interest rate of 1.15%. The high school, the police station done in 2016, a 30-year bond, 2.4%. But you can see by the list here that we have for all of these projects, really tremendously low rates, 2.5 or under for the projects listed here. So either we issued them at the low rate or they've been refinanced. So really it's been a long-term, very favorable interest rate environment for us. And looking at this list and seeing the terms for projects listed here that were issued even 10 years ago, this is why we're comfortable in starting to look at estimating a lower interest rate that we would receive for this project. One other item on our debt, so we have $32 million outstanding for bonds already issued. We do have some debt that's been authorized by town meeting and not yet issued long-term. So this chart at the bottom shows that list. And in total, it's just over $9 million. But to look at those different pieces, the first two items are the school-related items that, again, were mentioned earlier. The initial feasibility phase of $1.75 million and the bridge funding from the most recent town meeting of $1.46. So those pieces are components of this overall $87 million project. They're not on top of that. So this debt would be issued all in one with the new bond. The next item was a $500,000 borrowing authorization that was approved at the most recent town meeting, a sewer project with the MWRA. The select board just dealt with that debt at their most recent meeting just last week. The MWA has a terrific program where they partner with communities to help communities inspect and maintain their sewer systems. We were able to issue this debt with the MWRA. They provide a 75% grant option. So for this $500,000 project, they're giving us a straight grant for $375,000. And then we entered a 10-year zero interest rate loan with them for the remaining balance, the $125,000. So we will be paying back $125,000 over a 10-year period, zero interest rate, and that debt would be in our sewer budget. And then the final two pieces are the road improvement bond for about $4.5 million approved at the 2020 town meeting, and some small equipment, $650,000, that was approved at the most recent town meeting. And we'll show you that when we issue the road bond long term, it's going to replace that road bond that's dropping off, and so will fall within our current debt budget. And that was talked about a great deal when that road bond in 2020 was approved. So that's our debt outstanding. Just a quick look at, how do we judge how much debt we're carrying? So we do have financial policies as a town. We include those in the town meeting book that goes out to everyone. They're based on industry standards. They're what we would be judged on when we get our credit rating reviewed by Moody's and Standard & Poor's. Our financial policies with debt indicate that for our debt within 2.5, our debt should be, as shown in green, about 8%, not exceed 8% of our net general fund revenue. Right now, that would be about $7.7 million. For the debt we're actually paying within 2.5, we're at just over $3 million. So we're well within our guidelines for how much debt we're carrying as a town. Just to quickly review, as I mentioned, those sales that occurred in March. So we had the major bond sale in March 2021. And prior to that, we underwent a very extensive credit review with Standard & Poor's. We had not had a credit rating update since the police station bonds of 2016. So that was a long period. That was before really Westwood Station came online. We were also getting this credit review. We were going through it during COVID and all the uncertainty with that. But really, because of a lot of the practices that the town has in place, we had that AAA rating reaffirmed. That's an excellent rating for a small community like Westwood. It really reflects on all the work done by the town, including our select board, our finance and warrant commission meeting members, all of our other appointed and elected officials and boards, our residents, and our town meeting members. Really, all of the practices that we do with our budget process, making sure we have appropriate reserves, making sure we don't carry too much debt, all of that goes into that rating. And really, the higher rating really helps us get the lowest rate when we sell a bond. So we were pleased to undergo that review and get that AAA rating reaffirmed, even during a difficult time with COVID. As I mentioned, we sold a long-term bond for $7.7 million. It's a competitive sale bond. We had 5 bids received. The terms, again, for the different components of what was included in the $7.7 million, net interest rate of 1.14%. We also sold that short-term 1-year note for $4.5 million, and that's really the road bond that I mentioned. 1 year, that will renew in the spring, at which point we'll issue it long-term. Net interest rate of 0.249%. So excellent rates, historic low. And I will mention at the time of the sale, we did inquire about if we had sold a $30 million bond for the school project at this time in the spring, what interest rate might we have received? And we were told it would have been about a 2% rate, given that it was a longer term than this 20 here, but still in that environment, we probably would have been looking at a 2% rate at that time. One other item I just want to mention with that sale. The March sale included not only some new debt for things that town meeting had approved, but also refinancing of 2 existing bonds, the library bond and the Thurston modular bond. Total budgetary savings of $1.12 million. So the original bond for Thurston was a $3.5 million bond issued back in June 2009, a 20-year bond. The library was originally a $9.3 million bond issued back in March 2011. So the town treasurer, Gavin, was able to include these refundings within the sale of new debt. So for the 8 years remaining now in the Thurston modulars, there's $369,000 in savings over what we had planned to spend. And for the library, which has 10 years remaining at the time of the sale, $759,000 in budget savings. So tremendous savings. As the library bond is exempt debt, as I mentioned, voted outside of 2.5, we will now raise exactly $759,000 less in taxes than we had been scheduled to do over the remaining life of that bond. And that's about $75,000 less per year. So again, as I mentioned, we are only allowed to raise in taxes the exact amount of principal and interest for any exempt debt. And this is great news to be able to bring down that amount just because we were able to refinance the library bond. Finally, just to mention, the treasurer has previously refinanced debt when he can. Again, this refinancing saved $1.12 million. He did refinance the high school bond midway through its 20-year period. So back in 2012, about halfway through that, he refinanced that, and there was a savings of $2.7 million. Some of that went to us, some of that went to MSBA because they were paying their share of the cost. But overall, a tremendous savings. Looking now at our debt and how it rolls out going forward. So this chart shows you our debt payments each year for the debt that's within 2.5. So as I mentioned, shown in green, that's about $3.1 million in the current year. In this year, fiscal 22, we will make our final payment for a 10-year, $4.5 million DPW road bond that was issued back in 2012. So we'll make our final payment. In the spring, we will take that short-term note, issue a long-term bond for the $4.5 million bond that our 2020 town meeting approved. That debt's going to fit right in here. You can see the drop. So that debt will come online, replace the current debt, will not add to our total debt budget. Looking next at the debt outside of 2.5. So as I mentioned, right now, it's just the library and the high school bond. This is the exempt debt, the exact amount each year for the principal and interest for those two projects. When the bond ends, the debt, the taxability ends and our taxes come down. In our current year, FY22, just over $1 million for those two pieces, with the high school being about $485,000 and the library $563,000. And as I mentioned, the high school bond ending next year, fiscal 23, will be our last payment on that, and the library fiscal 2031. So when that high school bond ends, we will see this drop here for that payment ending, and that will absorb some of this new debt for the elementary school coming on. And again, as I mentioned, the library came down what we were paying, $75,000 drop each year here because of the refinancing of that bond. Just looking at one other item with the high school bond. And as I mentioned, this program was different with the MSBA 20 years ago. So the high school bond was issued as a 20-year bond with a level principal payment and declining interest. So each year, the total debt for the high school comes down. The total bar here each year shows the total principal and interest for the high school payment each year. So you can see that it gradually declines until it's completed in FY23. The blue represents the MSBA's payment to us. So we show in our budget, we receive annually right now a flat $1.4 million payment from MSBA towards the high school debt, and we have to apply it towards that debt. So you can see that that's a flat amount each year with the blue. So as our total debt comes down and the MSBA remains flat, the amount that we're raising from our residents has been slowly declining every year. So in this last year of the drop-off, we will see $1.8 million in total debt drop off, which is excellent. The portion that our residents are paying towards that in this final year is $406,000. It was much higher in earlier years. It's been a gradual decline of about $100,000 a year over the life of the debt. But in that final year, about $406,000. So our residents for the high school project were paying on average about $233 a year towards the high school debt. And again, in this last year, it's much smaller because of the way the MSBA finance projects under their old program. This, again, will not be how they do it going forward. We will not receive an annual payment like this. We will receive the payments towards the cost of the project as it goes. And the $1.4 million we receive from them will amount to $18.2 million, with the cost to the town $69.5 million. Looking at issuing the 30-year level debt service payment, this chart shows you at a 2% interest rate what would be the total cost of the project and what's our annual cost, or average annual cost. The first column shows you the total for the project. The middle column shows you the amount per 100,000 of home value. And then the right-hand column shows the amount for the average home in town, which Department of Revenue currently calculates at about $837,000. So at the 2% interest rate, the annual debt payment we would make is $3.1 million. That translates to $55 per 100,000 of home value, or about $462 for this home at $837,000 of value. Down at the bottom, and it was previously shown to you, is the impact of the roll-off of the high school. So again, the high school debt roll-off is much higher in terms of debt. The amount for the average home is lower because of the way the MSBA was reimbursing, about $60 drop off when that ends in fiscal 23. This chart just shows you at that 2% cost, we showed the amount for $55 per 100,000 home value, or $462 for $837,000 home. This shows what it would be for a range of home values in town. So a house assessed at $500,000, their annual payment will be $275. And this middle column shows about what is their current tax bill in FY21. So we're showing the cost per sampling of different home values from $500,000 up to $2.2 million, and the tax impact for each home. The chart at the bottom shows what is the range of home values in town. So this is information that we include each year in an insert we do in the tax bill, and again in our town meeting book. This shows you the number of homes in each category of value and how that's changed from FY12 to FY21. So the green bar shows you how many homes in each category. So there's 97 homes in town, over $2 million in value. There's over 2,200 homes in town in the $600,000 to $900,000 home. So on this chart here, where the impact for the average home, 50% of our homes fall into this range, the $600,000 to $900,000, and would be experiencing the impact here, $330 to just under $500 a year from this project. Finally, just to look again at that comparison, at the 2% interest rate, as we mentioned, $55 per 100,000 of home value per year, or $462 for an $837,000 home. At 3%, that number is $63 a year, or $529, or $72, $602 a year at a 4% interest rate. Again, just to summarize, the bond would be a 30-year level debt payment bond. The actual cost will depend on the interest rate that we get when we sell the bond. The lower the interest rate, the lower the total cost that we'll pay, and the lower the average cost for our home and residence. We cannot guarantee any rate. We work hard to maintain our AAA rating, which is an important component we can do to obtain that lowest rate. But again, we're showing you at these different rates, but based on our recent sales, and again, back to that chart that shows the rates that we've had really for the last almost up to a 10-year period, we are comfortable in showing this rate, the 2% rate for the debt, but we would always show the higher rate too, just to be comfortable that we are clearly showing to people what it could be. But at this point, the 4% rate would be a more conservative estimate, the 2% rate a more probable estimate of what that debt will cost us. And that's it. That's a walkthrough of what that will be and all of our existing debt.
Okay, Pam, thank you. That is a lot of information. Can you hear me now? That is a lot of information in a short period of time. Can you switch this so we can see all the people and not the slide? So I'm going to ask again to try to make this as organized as possible. If you could raise your hand if you have a question or a comment, or raise your hand in Zoom, which I will pay attention to this time. So Peter Iddick, and keep yourself on mute. Jane will unmute you when we call on you. So just raise your hand either in Zoom or on the screen, and we'll get to every question. Peter.
Okay, my question concerns the 30-year bonds. 30-year municipal bonds generally carry much higher interest rates than 20-year bonds, as were used for the high school, generally about 1% higher for AAA bonds. My question is, for Westwood, how much higher is the interest rate for 30-year bonds rather than for 20-year bonds? And how much extra will this difference cost us over 30 years?
Yep, I think one of the slides that I showed, I can go back if you'd like. We sold the police station, the new construction for the police station was a 30-year bond, and that rate was 2.4%. So right now, with rates so low, even extending out to 30 years, we're receiving lower rates.
Pam, are you still using the slide deck?
No, I'm not.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Bill Bruce, you had a question.
Yeah, two questions actually. PM, on slide 11, you talked about the average annual cost for that homeowner it being $462. That stays consistent over the 30 years, correct? If I'm following this, that 462 number?
That stays consistent, yes.
Right, so 462, 10, 20, 30 years down the line looks very different than 462 today when you think of inflation.
Yes, that's a good point, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to make that point. And then on slide 9, you know, I think it would be helpful if we can get data that goes back prior to fiscal year 16, because when you're talking about $3 million in annual cost, I think it gives more context because if I'm following again correctly, the debt reduces over time. So if we go back another 5 or 10 years, it's going to look very different when you're talking about, you know, maybe adding 3 million onto the 0.53 here.
Yes, that's a great point. I will do that. And I will point out that, I think it was mentioned earlier, but the time that the town did the high school project, at a similar time we did the Martha Jones and Downey renovation projects, and they were all exempt debt, all outside of Prop 2.5. We were at that point, again, it was a very different program. They all received some MSBA funding. But those of you who remember how that worked back then, we had a period where the MSBA, when they were in trouble in transitioning to their new program, they did not make their debt payments for several years, and we were issuing our whole bonds. So we had periods where that exempt debt was quite high to our residents. So I will extend that chart to kind of show those earlier years.
Great, thank you, Pam.
Thank you. I don't see any hands raised in the, okay, Tom.
Thanks, Diane. Pam, thanks again, and great job as usual. And I mentioned this in the past, but I was wondering, is it possible to quantify what the savings would be based on the AAA rating for the town on the interest paid on various bonds and all, if our rating were something less than AAA? Just to provide some sort of context and also show the benefits of all the sound fiscal management for the town.
Yep.
And the real savings that results in.
Yes, I will ask our bond counsel to run that for us and get some numbers for you. Yes, can do that.
Cool, thank you.
Michael Gay, I see a hand.
Yep, thank you so much. I echo Tom's statement. Pam, thank you so much for all you do. I'm going to go back to what George mentioned. We're looking at 41 million to bring our schools up to code versus 69 million and change to, you know, effectively build a new school. The numbers that you show for the cost per home is for the full 69 million. I think it would be helpful if we show the difference, because that's the true number that we're looking at. And then secondarily, that also would carry the potential of additional debt down the line in a shorter period, maybe 5, 10, 15 years down the line, to bring the schools that we just brought up to code to repair additional things that we need for those schools. So I think that the numbers are kind of a worst case scenario, assuming that 2% interest rate or potentially 3 or whatever we get. So that's just my 2 cents, that the numbers are like the worst case scenario for Westwood. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael. Okay. So I want to be sure I'm not missing anybody this time around. I don't think I am. Okay. So thank you to our presenters. It was fabulous, of course. As always, you do such a great job, and we appreciate it. I do want to ask if there are any comments from the public. There's certainly nothing in the chat, and there's no one in the room. So we are going to close that section. Okay. So I want to just comment a minute on our next meeting. I am getting a terrible feedback. Is that anything that can be fixed? Thank you very much. Okay, so just a couple of minutes on our next meeting. Anyone who has any questions, and you've made some requests this evening, so folks are going to get us some information before our next meeting on the 20th. But as you think about this and review the slide deck again and ponder it in your mind, if you have questions you would like folks to address before or at our hearing on the 20th, please do get them to Jane, and she will get them out, and we will be sure people are prepared to address them on the 20th. Because I don't believe we need to go through this presentation again on the 20th. I think that we can delve into our very detailed conversation and thoughts among committee members and hear from the public and be able to take a very informed vote. So we have lots of information. If you didn't listen to the select board meeting where Pam did a similar presentation, you might want to just do that. This is recorded. You might want to go back and look at this. We do have a mentor-mentee program for new members. If you have any questions as a new member and you want to raise those questions, please do that. You have a mentee, you can always reach out to that person. And if you have any other questions that you want for Jane or I to address prior to the hearing on the 20th, please send them in. So I'm going to go to Jane and see if I've missed anything. And then we're going to vote. We're going to close the public hearing next on the 20th, and we're going to vote on the 20th. So be prepared to do that, please. Again, send us anything that you think might be helpful to you as you consider this vote. It's obviously a very important vote for the town. So that
we're going to approve minutes.
Is that. So we need to approve minutes from June 2, 2021. I will take a motion to approve those minutes.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, George.
Are there any comments on the minutes? Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Who is that?
Bill.
I think it was Bill.
Thanks.
All in favor, and I think Jane has to do a roll call.
I do. Bill Bruce?
Yes.
Jim Ferraro?
Yes.
Lauren Fitzpatrick?
Yes.
Mike Gay?
I wasn't present, but I watched the video, so I will vote yes.
Okay. George Hertz?
Yes.
Angela Hughes?
Yes.
Peter Ittig?
Yes.
Caitlin Jerzak?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Diane?
Yes, present in the room.
Nadine?
Yes.
Thank you. Christina?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
And Alex?
Alex, are you still with us?
You might be gone.
Yeah, might have dropped off. Okay.
We're good.
All right. So I think that unless Jane, I'm missing something, or any member of the committee has anything further, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn.
And I do have to do roll call.
George?
Oh, wait, one moment before we adjourn. There is a new business. I would like to make a comment.
If it's related to this warrant article, we will take your comment.
This warrant article.
Peter, is it related to this warrant article?
We have coming attractions, which you will hear about soon. All right, great.
Peter, can you speak up, please?
I was going to observe that we have some coming attractions. There is a warrant article that was taken off the agenda by the select board.
Right, so Peter, we appreciate your thoughts and comments about that, and we'll take them when the select board puts that warrant before us. It is not before us tonight. George Latham, did you have other comments?
I just had a question. The September 20th meeting is the special town meeting for the public hearing, and that's when the FinCom will vote to whether they are going to support or not support it. That is a different meeting from the October 18th, the special town meeting, correct?
That's right.
Exactly right.
So our meeting is the 20th, and we will vote, and then it will go before town meeting with our vote before the town.
So that will be a Zoom meeting just of the FinCom, correct?
We need to figure that out.
We'll figure it out.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, George. Okay, we'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Who is that,
Second.
George?
It was Michael.
Thank you, Michael. We need a second.
Second?
Second. Yeah, I'll second it.
Thank you, Chris.
We need a roll call?
I need to roll call.
Jane says we need a roll call.
Bill Bruce?
Yep.
Jim Ferraro?
Yes.
Lauren?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
George? Hertz?
Yes, yes.
Angela?
Yes.
Peter Ittig?
Yes.
Caitlin?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Yes. George?
Yes.
Diane?
Yes.
Nadine?
Yes. Yes.
Christina?
Yes.
Chris Prada?
Yes.
And Alex? I think he's gone. All set.
Okay. Thank you again. We apologize for the earlier problems. We'll get this down. Thank you all.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.